think that's what.
Marvelous. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Now it is recording.
Brilliant. Marvelous. Thank you. Okay, I guess the question is simple. Where do we go from here? I'm sure you're aware of what's going on.
Mm, Mostly what it is patience. By that meaning, it has to work its way out. There's a penchant to say we don't want to kill anyone. The problem is that at what point will society look at it and say, we don't care how many deaths there are, we want free?
Yeah, indeed.
And since the majority of the deaths so far have been in people over 60 with medical conditions, there will be the thought process, oh, well, just let them go. If they survive, if they don't, it's not our problem. We are going to survive. Problem is that we surviving at the current stage, you might say that about 25% of the human population has had coronavirus.
Okay.
That means that essentially 75% has not. And in that 75% has not is a lot of people with underlying conditions that don't even know they have underlying conditions.
Okay.
So you can expect death rates to accelerate and get earlier. I will give you a concept. With the disease, what it is, if someone has allergies, it's a negative for this disease. If someone has asthma, it's almost a death sentence for them.
Yeah.
If you are 12 or if you are 20, your chances of recovery with asthma are about 60%.
Yeah.
It is a deadly virus. Is it deadly enough? Here's a concept. In the 1800s, you would not have had an ability to fight against this virus. It would have swept through your population and the world about like the 1918 Spanish flu did.
Hmm.
It is real.
So the thing, so that brings up the issue of almost three elements um, that obviously we want to be responsible citizens with regard to the virus. However, there is the other element of to what extent am I and others right to see the government acting fraudulently and taking advantage of the real virus to create what you might call a fake virus as an instrument for control.
The element of it is what you end up with is a population that's actually out of control. By that meaning, you will not stay inside forever. Starvation will make you step out of the street. Work you will have to go back to. Essentially, it burdens any government extremely. There's no advantage except in the short term to see just how much you can control a population.
Quite.
But the problem is it's not a false flag. You understand the concept false flag?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, this is my position has been that the virus is real, but the government has taken advantage of it to exercise excess control.
The problem is the government is not taking control of the right place. Think in this term. This virus has been in the human population since November of last year. It's actually been in the human population for the last 2,000 years. But the capacity of it is that it went dormant in the human population, and a group of scientists from every country studying the Arctic tundra went and dug it up. It infected every member of that international party. In that international party was scientists from Italy, scientists from China, scientists from, you might say, only one scientist from Japan, scientists from the United States, scientists from every one of the four, you might say, European countries. Those scientists all took back this virus. And those scientists, depending upon how much they were interacting with other scientists, interacted and spread the virus. And the nature of the virus is such that you can be spreading it for 15 days and not even know you have it. Another issue of this virus is that you can actually have it, and not even know you had it. It's roughly a few coughs and that's the end of it. So, since these were scientists, they were in relatively decent physical shape. They had a fairly high content of oxygen to their blood system, and they did not become really badly sick. But they exposed others. In China, they went back to the research institute and they spread it around, and because China is so closely knit for people right on top of each other, and because China is so unguarded in terms of hazards, it caught on there. But it also caught on in Italy, it also caught on in the United States, it also caught on in other places. So, because they didn't see this thing as a problem, they didn't see it as a real virus, nobody did anything about it. Then it got bigger and bigger, and finally they realized that it was going to get out of control, and they actually started doing something about it. But your country and the United States didn't actually think anything about it. It was thought, well, just leave it go. It's like the flu. People are going to get by with it. The problem with it is when large amount of people started dying, that's when your country decided to do something about it. By that time, the simple things that they might have been able to do had they caught it early enough, it was too late and draconian measures had to be taken. If the nations of the world were prepared for that kind of an outbreak, they would also be prepared for tests. And those tests, if run early enough, would give you some indication of the type of virus it is and some indication of how deeply it strikes into your society. But you didn't do that. You didn't test. Not only did you not test, but essentially what government did is violated its principles, which is to protect the citizens.
So, obviously, my concern is I'm trying to be accurate. To me, it all goes back to the 3rd of March when they issued their 530,000 UK deaths, 2.2 million American deaths. There was literally zero information from the charts. It was just a short straight line in the only place in the world that was available, which is Hubei, other than the ship. So to me, it looks like they issue an absurd number that has proven to be massively wrong when they had no information. On the 6th,
Yes.
and on the 16th, they confirmed that with a report designed with a ridiculous number. And on the 23rd, when they could have looked at Hubei and said, right, we get it, we know what the number is going to be. It's approximately 3,000 in Hubei. Add 10% to Britain, that's about 3,500. That is a working estimate. That is clearly not 530,000. We'll tell the public that, yes, it does not appear to be an existential threat. Instead, they did not do that. They chose to instead say, effectively, those numbers stand, you're going into lockdown, and to me that looks like, an exaggerated number. They lied, they put us into lockdown, and then on April the 5th, Bill Gates says, oh, by the way, you're not coming out until the vaccine. Trudeau says you're not coming out to the vaccine. British government not coming out till the vaccine. So to me it looks like big lie, lockdown, you're not coming out till the vaccine. That to me looks like a business opportunity for Big Pharma, not a legitimate response. But I don't want to be wrong.
You're not wrong, and yet you're not right.
Okay.
You're not right because it's incompetence on the part of the government.
That was my first position until I saw the report of the 16th of March, when they had clearly created a report with the same massively exaggerated numbers, which had zero foundation except for the massively discredited R0 kind of models. It was literally invented out of thin air. How do I respond to that?
First off, what are the numbers today?
They dropped them down to 5,700, and I think they're up at 13,000. But again, there is another issue. We've got a 13% death rate. The average of the 47 countries I track is 4.6. Hubei, 4.6. China CDC, 4.6. It's like the average is 4.6 and we're up at 13. And we get stories of doctors stuffing deaths into COVID-19. So to us it looks a lot like fraud.
Actually, they're not.
Okay.
Actually, what you might say is this. In all of those other countries, people die. In all of those other countries, it's more normal to have them die at home. Think in terms of Italy.
Yeah,
Italy has an aged population that lives with its children.
yeah.
Consequently, they are all over the place. And when they die, typically the thought process is, well, grandma died from cardiac arrest. And it isn't really reported. So, on the one hand, any country that has multi-generational dwelling is probably going to have multi-problems with their counting.
Oh, so you're saying, ironically, ours are fairly accurate and they are undercounting because, hey, they died and nobody worried
Yes,
about it. Oh, okay,
exactly.
okay.
Number two, yours are typically, it's reported, they died from pneumonia complicated by COVID-19.
Yeah,
19. Complicated by. Not died of, but complicated by. And almost every death is in some way complicated by it. Now, those deaths would occur, maybe not this week, maybe not next week, maybe not 10 years from now. But the capacity of it is they're all over the place. Your counting system counts anything with COVID as the cause.
yeah.
Their counting system doesn't say it's the cause, it says complicated by.
So what effectively because this is where it gets problematic because effectively um, the government kind of position is it's COVID you should be afraid of. Look at that. That was COVID. Look how bad it is. That's COVID. That's why you're staying in your home. Wait for the vaccine. Whereas other countries you're saying are saying, yes, an old person died. I mean, even they're even admitting in Britain, 99% of Italian deaths were already ill or whatever. The difference is that over everywhere else or in other places perhaps it's positioned as um, yes, we've got COVID-19. Yes, people are dying because of issues. And yes, COVID-19, as you say, is a factor. Over here, it's treated as, oh my God, look, it's COVID-19. Oh my God, look, it's COVID-19. Oh my God, look at COVID-19. That's why you're in your home. Wait for the vaccine.
Exactly.
And this, so can we perhaps, I mean, if we step back, because,
Now, if you couple that with incompetence, general incompetence, it's easy to see why you might say this. Let's say you have a college graduate in biology, and you have a college graduate in business administration, and you put the college graduate in charge with business administration. What's the likelihood that when something like this comes along, they're going to be able to make intelligent choices, reasoned choices, early enough that you can fight against it?
well,
Very small.
yes, quite.
Incompetence.
But the thing is, I mean, let's step back and because I want to be fair, but equally, I don't like living in a country where, if you say, even if it is incompetence, to me that's a non-excuse because incompetent people should not be shutting us into our homes. At some point, there needs to be. I mean, let me ask it this way: at the end of the day, what does the universe? I call it the universe spirit. You know what you are. I don't declare it publicly. What does the universe say is fair to the principles and people of the United Kingdom, of the United States, of Canada, of the world, what is the fair position that the government ought to be taking in regard to our freedom?
Protecting it, no matter what.
And that is protecting the freedom, not the people, or the freedom, not the health, or what does that look like to you?
The people. Think in this term. If you're going to err, would you prefer to err on the side of caution or science?
Well, I'd have to say it's caution, but my caution would be two-dimensional, because you have two considerations. One is, yes, there is a risk of dying, but there's a risk of dying from something every day anyway, and there is a risk of there is a direct economic risk of, like, with all the people that pay for this country, their lives are shut down, and they are the people that are supposed to keep our civilization going. So you cannot.
They can't. They simply can't, because there's the concept of, if even one person dies, we're going to be blamed.
Exactly, and this was the first thing I addressed in my first presentation, that in this society, with the media as it is, a death is unacceptable. It does not occur to people that we all die. A death is a death is unacceptable.
That's correct.
And yet, even as I'm making this, 1,500 people in Britain will have died today, but nobody will have noticed.
Exactly.
So if I again step back, if I appreciate that the universe does not violate free will, but at the end of the day, if the universe was to say, what would be fair to all those people sitting in their homes, to those of us who think, I'm sorry, I am willing to accept risk in life. I do not see that, I get that this is more serious than the flu from what you're saying, but at the end of the day, life is also serious. I have a right and an obligation and a choice to continue with life. What would be fair in regard to the two elements of freedom? What would be fair for freedom? What would be fair, well, three elements. What would be fair for freedom? What would be fair for medical? And what would be fair for economic?
First off, there is no fair.
Okay.
The reason there is no fair is because a virus doesn't care about fair.
Well, absolutely.
It doesn't care.
Absolutely.
Second off, it's only because you think yourself superior to the virus that you can actually do anything about the virus.
Okay.
In 1918, when the Spanish flu came through, it came through twice. The first time, lightly. The second time, with a vengeance. It struck old and young in about the same proportion. So it was different. And it was different because it was a flu. It has a cycle. At the time, there was nothing that you could do about it. Just bury those died. It was a tragedy, but it was not an avoidable tragedy. Now, you have the belief that you can avoid the tragedy. But the virus doesn't care. Left to its own regard, the virus would sweep through your population, killing off all of those that couldn't sustain it. Think in this term. Viruses don't mean to kill. Unlucky viruses end up in a body that dies. But they don't mean to kill. They mean to survive. And they mean to create. That's what they do. And just like everything inside of the isthmus, it means to create. So the concept of it is, what's fair? Well, from the virus's standpoint, it's all fair. It's just a fact of life that maybe it's not going to survive. Think of it this way. From the virus's standpoint, 100% of its population is dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it gets into the body, it infects the body, it thrives for a short period of time, it thrives for approximately 20 generations, and then the body starts attacking it. When the body starts attacking it at first, it attacks and it kills off a large amount. But as it goes on, the body attacks it more and more until finally all of it is dead. So from a virus's point of view, it's very totally unfair.
Exactly. They're all yeah.
Keep in concept. You want to keep perspective.
Absolutely.
Now, the real perspective is this. At what point do you as a human being acknowledge that you're willing to accept the death of someone that may have 20 years in their future?
Yeah.
At what point?
So,
Because essentially, if you just went for it, there would be a certain amount of your population that would have 20 years, but don't because of some underlying condition. Here's a thought. If you have, how many people in your society have heart problems?
well, I don't know, but I'd assume it's substantial, maybe 20, 30%, I don't know, guess.
All of them are dead.
What, literally anyone that did have it is now dead?
Will be.
Wow. Okay.
How many people in your society have advanced diabetes?
Well, I'm type 2. I don't know how many have type 1, but it's non-trivial.
Yes. Type 2, you're dead.
Wow.
Anything that affects your cardio or your circulatory system is risky. So essentially, you might not actually die from getting coronavirus, but the extreme element of coronavirus is such that it leaves your body debilitated for life, possibly. It's not the sort of thing that if you have some underlying condition, well, you'll get over like the flu. It actually does some damage to your liver. It does some damage to your kidneys. It does some damage to almost all of your internal organs, and anything that you have that's a little short on oxygen, it can damage it. So it's really a much bigger killer than it's been let to be.
Huh, okay.
The virus is. Now, how you handle it is how long you prolong the suffering. If you just said, well, we don't care, it does what it does, and it's a virus like any other virus, and it's God's way that it takes out whoever goes. They were called back. So you could take an extremely Christian aspect of it, and what's fairer than Christian, and say, let it be God's will. But you don't. You try to save Grandma and Grandpa, but you also save Harry down the street who has a little bit of a heart murmur. And you also save Mary Jane, who's pregnant with a child and has some form of diabetes. That's the nature. You might say is you can applaud your humanity, but you're appalled because you have to stay inside. Now, the problem with it is no government is getting funding.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things I highlighted, and that's the trouble. The picture looks so much like taking advantage of us.
Yes, but it's suicide for governments.
Which to me, it looks like that's fine if you happen to be somebody that is richer than a government and can lend to the government.
Now, the question is, the government can't pay it back.
Huh, that's interesting. Have they done that much damage then?
They've damaged themselves. And the capacity of it is Big Pharma is not going to loan to the government.
No, it's going to be one of your paid.
Because Big Pharma has its own ideal. The problem with it is Big Pharma isn't competent either. Because it's comprised of money makers and money exchangers, and essentially the labs don't work unless they're going to be productive towards Big Pharma making a lot of money, so that's what they're all set up and geared for, making a lot of money. But you can't make a lot of money out of this virus vaccine, because everybody in the world is going to require it. It's equal everywhere. So the problem is, what do you do? Well, let's say I'm Levi Lilly. That is a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
Let's say that I'm Levi Lilly, and I derive a vaccine that's 100% effective at stopping the coronavirus in its tracks in every single patient, and allowing the body's immune system to actually bolster and grow up to take care of it. Do I patent it? I'm Levi Lilly. Of course I patent it.
Yeah.
Which means that I have a 6-month time from the time I find the answer to the time when I have the patent to the time when I can allow it out for testing.
Yeah.
Which places it about a year out. Realistically, you as people require the answer now. Not 6 months from now, not a year from now. The idea that it should take a year, no, it shouldn't. Here's concept. Once it is the polio vaccine was derived, the person that invented the polio vaccine and gave it out to everybody. And everybody started putting it into little things. They put it into sugar cubes. They put it into pills. They put it into almost everything to get it out there. And the time from the discovery of the polio vaccine to distribution to every human being on the planet was less than 3 months.
Wow, okay.
So there's no particular reason why, with the nature of, think in this term, a coronavirus simply denotes a virus that has certain amount of animal DNA to it.
Okay.
And breaking down the coronavirus, there's you might say, one simple way is break the coronavirus so that the part of it that is the animal can't transfer, or so the part of it that is the human doesn't transfer. All you have to do is break free of the chains and it won't transfer.
Okay.
So they have been developing and have developed methods to break coronaviruses for the last 30 years. They're well skilled. In the labs, they are well skilled. There's no particular reason why they can't come up with a virus cure in 6 months' time.
Okay.
And that's 6 months' time from back in November.
Right.
And any delays have to do with how do we make money out of this.
Yeah, well, there's a surprise. I mean, simple question then. I mean, literally, has one of them already done the work and is just waiting for the best opportunity, or?
Yes. And no. Yes, but there are more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
That's the thought process.
Yeah.
The reality of it is, coronaviruses, there's pathways that are well known.
Yeah.
And that's what these commercial labs are using. On the other hand, there's a fairly simple cure that a small lab is put together. You might say it's a group of 50 virologists that is working out of a facility that is put together by funding Bill Gates funding. They have all the equipment, they have all the things, and they have independence.
Yeah.
So essentially, a cure that everyone can use is in the works. But the problem with it is you have to stand back and say, essentially, we want to use this for 50 people, and then we want to look at the result of it, and we want to use it for 500 people, then we want to look at the use and we want to use it for 10,000 people. That can't be longer than a month.
Right.
And that's the problem. Because right now, all of the countries everywhere looks at it and says that should take 6 months. And we should go through all of the regulations to make sure that the cure is not worse than the disease.
Yeah.
Answer? A cure that's not worse than the disease is to just stand back and do nothing. Let the disease run its course. Everybody get up, go to work. Everybody mingle in the way that you normally would mingle, and just let it run its course.
You're saying that would be not worse than the disease, or that would be worse than the disease?
It would be the disease. Another way to think about it is this. Anything you do that slows down the death rate is a cure of some sort.
Okay.
If you think about it in terms of most wondrous, let's think about it in terms of mathematics.
I've been trying.
When you have a zero base, that's your starting point.
Well,
Nothing is perceived to be worse than that.
yeah.
So if you think of this virus as the zero base, it's just if we did nothing, this would happen.
Yeah.
Now you can't know for certainty this would happen, but you can project.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, ultimately, if you just let it run its course and be what it is, just took the idea that, well, nature has its course and this is one of nature's problems and it's going to occur, let it be. That would be your zero base.
Right. And can I say, I mean, is Sweden is Sweden a good example of that? I mean, is that a legitimate example of that?
It's relatively legitimate except for one thing.
Uh-huh.
The Swedish population is predominantly young.
Okay.
The Swedish population is predominantly fairly well exercised in terms of things, and the Swedish population, because it is cold so much of the time, the Swedish population has a high propensity for large oxygen in the blood system.
Okay, so it is a legitimate no intervention country, but the characteristics of the people should be taken into account.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, here's a thought. In your body, there's a ratio of oxygen.
Uh-huh.
That ratio of oxygen is that approximately 6% of the oxygen that you bring into the body stays in the body. If you are compromised in some way, that ratio goes down so that 6% maybe becomes only 5%.
Right.
If it gets down to 4%, You are on the verge. You are very, very sick.
Yeah.
The problem with it is, you might say there are meters. And meters say, essentially, 100% is equal to the 6%.
Right.
So you use this meter to say, what's the ratio of oxygen? And typically, 95 to 98% for a healthy person.
Right.
A non-healthy person starts out at about 80%.
Yeah. Okay.
In the Swedish population, almost because of the cold and because of a lot of other things, their hemoglobin count is very, very high.
Right.
And essentially, if they were to use one of these meters, almost everyone would be 100% because they're actually more than that.
Right. Okay.
So consequently, the population is younger and healthier.
Can I ask? Because that instead of what occurs to me, given what you've said, instead of testing for the virus, which is open to doubt and whatever, presumably testing for oxygen in the blood is very straightforward.
Yes,
So why? So
which means you can actually make some assumptions about the health of someone by the oxygen in the blood.
so for example, going from that, effectively, you could say right, um, and you could even do home testing or whatever. I don't know. But the bottom line is, look, here's the situation. If you're at 90, if you're at 90 or above, go to work, do whatever you like. If you're below 90, you should seek medical advice, and if you're below 80, you should stay at home. What about something like that?
Exactly.
Wow, that would be so much easier.
Yes, it would be. Except you have to have competence.
So what I just made up those numbers. Tell it what numbers should I have? What numbers would be reasonable to use instead of 100?
If you had one of these oxygen meters,
Uh huh.
anything below 95 would be cause for concern.
Okay, fine.
Think of it this way. Above 95, it's of interest.
Yeah.
Below 95, it's of concern.
Right. And what level is sign of you really need to be either put into protective care or whatever?
80.
Brilliant. Well, God, that would be so much easier.
It would be, except for one thing.
Oh,
They're going after the virus as if it feeds on oxygen, and it actually feeds on lack of oxygen.
right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, well, okay. Well, you've given us you know, that would be great. So first thing, I need to clear the air because I hate the idea that I have misaccused people. So how much? What elements have I got right and wrong? So the initial lie was that. I mean, how can you have a lie as a number that bad? Was that truly an absurd number, or
No, it's the thought process. We don't know what we're going to have to do.
so it was?
And we don't know what we're doing.
Great, brilliant.
And we don't really understand all of it. All we know is that we're supposed to take care of the people. What do we do?
Yeah,
Well, let's just exaggerate the numbers to make it really important that people do what they're supposed to do until we can figure out what is the right thing to do.
yeah. Oh, okay. So bottom. So what? So
The exaggerated numbers are a little bit like, let's tell the children about Santa Claus.
Or about monsters that will come and eat you if you don't eat your vegetables.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Or about the Easter Bunny.
So basically, it was a total fabrication, but they thought they were doing it to give themselves room.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So
It
basically,
wasn't a fabrication to engender them to a larger power.
so how much? Oh, so, I mean, this is where it gets so difficult. I mean, okay, Bill Gates. Am I going to have to apologize for what my conjecture about Bill Gates?
Mm, yes and no.
What should I state with regard to Bill Gates?
What have you stated so far?
Well, I've basically said that um, he misrepresented or lied 26 times in 2 minutes. Exponential, lethal. Everyone's going. A lot of people die. All the rest of it.
Here's a thought. Is Bill Gates a virologist?
No,
Is Bill Gates a scientist?
no.
So how is Bill Gates more qualified
Well,
than anyone else except to say, we can do something about this if we take advantage right now?
yeah,
We don't want to wait. We want to do it.
right.
Better to overkill than get killed.
Because the thing is, I mean, it did surprise me when I saw the numbers for vaccine revenue. The whole world, 59 billion. I mean, that's pocket change to a government. But I mean, it was kind of like the best I had sort of thing. It's like, well, because it looked like, I mean, it looked invent a big number, scare the people, put them in their homes, and then wait for the vaccine. Well, that looks like a very easy con. Um,
You can't put them in their homes and wait for the vaccine.
I mean, that's what they basically did and are saying, isn't it?
Realistically, this. If you have, let's say, you hypothetically had $1 million that you could use any way you wanted to.
Yeah. Lost you? Right, sorry. I lost you. I had you until $1 million, use any way you want to.
Yes. Now, if someone tells you that for your own protection you have to remain isolated,
Yeah.
would that be a big deal for you?
No, not if I've got $1 million sitting in the bank. I'll get bored and watch videos until I'm out.
Yes. But if you don't have that $1 million, if you have only about 100 pounds,
Absolutely.
now you're told you're supposed to go inside and weather it out with your 100 pounds.
Exactly.
That's realistically not something that's going to happen, and it's realistically a pressure point in a society.
Absolutely.
At some point, your society will look at it and say, I don't care who dies, as long as it isn't me.
Yeah.
And I don't care if I die because I won't worry about it.
Exactly.
So essentially, it's the pressure of society to say, we want free.
Yeah.
And there is no fair.
Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot of governments have taken advantage of this to, I mean, shooting people in the streets and whatever. I mean, to what extent was this coordinated, and to what extent is this every country is being an idiot?
Mm, about 60% every country is being an idiot.
And I have to ask, because so many of us are going to ask it, or think it. You know, what is there an architect? Is there a cabal, an elite, Illuminati? I mean, is there that is is someone taking advantage of this against us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Care to illuminate?
Here's the concept. There's nobody that's happier than Putin right now.
Sorry, say again. There's no one.
No one happier than Putin.
Oh, really?
And there's no one happier than all of the dictators in the world. If they had their own plan, this would be it.
Okay. But
because it forces a little bit of the dictatorship. And everyone wants to rule the world.
So what you're saying is that, I mean, to be explicit, so this was, I mean, I always said that I believe the virus is real, but that maybe, to once it started occurring, it's very easy for very smart people to say, look, we can ride this, we can scare people, we can take advantage. Did anyone ride this and scare people to take advantage?
Everyone wants to rule the world.
So we should. So what I get from that is you're not going to name names, but we should be appropriately skeptical.
What I'm going to say is, in the police forces, you have people that want to rule the world, and they are going to abuse people.
Yeah.
To prove their own power.
Yeah.
They don't have, you might say, a vested interest. They are simply released to exert power.
Yeah.
Now, the people that release them don't really expect they're going to abuse the populace. But when they do, they're going to defend them.
Yeah.
I'll give you a hint. I don't really understand it. I sent him out there to make people wear their masks. And somebody refused to put on a mask, and they tried to force that person to isolation so they don't infect everybody else. And then it accelerated outwards, and that person ended up dead.
Yeah.
Problem is, people do that.
Yeah.
And there are people in your society that are so enamored of their own power that given the chance to operate their own power, they'll abuse.
Yeah.
And it stretches all the way up to number 10 Downing Street.
Oh, I have no doubt.
So the concept is, in order for that not to occur, there has to be a sensitivity inherent. And you don't find that easily in narcissists, and you don't find that easily in sociopaths.
Well, exactly. Okay.
And sociopathism and narcissism are an integral part of your societies at this time because of isolationism.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, noting the minutes, two questions. Firstly, to what extent is it acceptable and appropriate, and in what fashion should I be free to share this, or share parts of it, or not share it? What would be your advice there, or your request there?
anything you want to do.
Seriously?
Seriously.
So if I put this up and say, look, here's my conversation, make of it what you will, that would be perfectly acceptable to you.
Yes.
Wow, awesome, thank you. Second thing, where my idea for making a difference, because if you've got incompetent leaders, we have to take the blame for not being the leaders ourselves. So what about my effort? What about my initiative? Should we continue?
Yes. Here's thought process. As long as you are using the grace of self to allow for people to make mistakes, don't expect competency.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I accept that.
Here's thought
Yeah,
process. With what I have said so far, if you can keep it all together, you can do it. On the other hand, if there is a part inside of you that wants to cherry pick it, you can do that. When you cherry picked information, that's usually because you are afraid of something or you're trying to prove something.
yeah. I was afraid that we were being manipulated.
Yes. And you can manipulate information to manipulate people's opinions.
Well, and that's what I was hoping to defend against, because because every day in the media we get massive information against us.
Yes. And it's very difficult. But it's human nature, and it's people being human.
Yeah.
Time is done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Here's the hint. Don't give up the ship. Just put your oars in the water in a little different way with grace.
I hear you totally. I totally hear you. Thank you.